Hello, Kate Pryor. Thank you so much for being on the Authors on Audio podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm wonderful. I'm super excited to be here, be talking about Be My Bad Guy. So, the first question I want to ask you is pretty much the first question I ask all my authors, but tell me the story of how you got into writing.
I believe I was in seventh grade and I stayed home from school one day, sick, and I was bored. So this is like the era before everyone had like a personal computer, This is early 2000s, especially before kids had personal computers. And we had this with the family computer, and then we had this beige dinosaur of a machine that, Windows 98. We weren't using it anymore, and it was in the basement, so I dug it out of the basement and I put all the pieces together and just it didn't connect to the internet. It only had Microsoft Word on it. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to entertain myself and write stories. And I didn't even know how to like properly type. I was hunting and pecking, and somehow like actual typing skills came out of that.
Oh my gosh, so you were a spicy romance writer from way
From the
back.
get-go, I was
Yeah.
like, everything needs more spice. Why is nobody making out the way I want them to be?
Oh my gosh, I love it. I totally relate to, you describing the big tan machine that you use your toe to turn it on and you have
Yes. Oh
like
my
the
gosh.
windows come on and sometimes all of your writing would get deleted because autosave was like
Oh my
not a
God.
thing yet.
I've lost so many chapters that I still think about. I'm still like, maybe it got saved as like under a different file name and I can find it.
Yeah, yeah, no, the struggle was real. Modern authors have no idea how easy they have it.
For real.
So, okay, so you were always into the romance writing, the spicy writing. How did the monster fiction come about? Because I went through your catalog and you've written a lot of monster romance. So, how did you get into that niche specifically?
Kind of by accident. Like, I've always loved monsters in books, and I've always loved romance. I was more of a historical romance girly at first, but there was this one year that my friend said, "Oh, there was a this indie publishing company put out an open call for monster romance, and I'm gonna submit a short story to it." And I had a thought like, I could do that. Yeah. And so then there, I don't know if it was like a small like I don't even know what the word I want for it is like not a tragedy because it's not a tragedy but like a little disaster, a little it was called Violet Gaze Press was the publishing company that put out this call, and then the person who had given them the idea to create an anthology was not being credited for it, and I think it was RM Virtues, and so he was, reasonably upset about this. And people were, joining like their voices to his and saying, like, hey, guys, this isn't cool. Like, you should give him credit for this. And then the people who were running I think there were only like two people running this company, had a little social media meltdown. And instead of apologizing and just blew up the whole thing, said, actually, everyone's, we're blowing up the whole company. We're closing. Goodbye.
Whoa.
There were like 30 people, I want to say, who had short stories in this anthology, and everyone was super bummed about it. And it was a really wonderful moment after that of like a groundswell of community for indie authors because we were all, well, if they're not going to help us put this story out here, we will all help each other. I'll make a cover for you and you'll help me get some editing done on this. Like, we were exchanging services, and I think a lot of that contributed to it was such a positive community that like I never wanted to leave.
So cool. That's such a cool origin story.
Right? No, I love it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's one of the things that I love the more I kind of dive into the indie author community is there's so much, I don't know the word I'm looking for, just like solidarity, I think, like
Yeah.
with each other and in supporting your work and making sure you get credit and supporting other artists. It's such a beautiful thing. I love indie authors so
It
much.
really is. Like, everyone knows how hard it is to like wear all the hats and to like you're learning everything and you're pulling from all these sources and you don't know who to trust or what to trust really. And there's so many people out there who are like selling you their services and might not necessarily have like they have more of an eye on their bottom line than they are like genuinely helping you. And so a lot of the indie author community is so focused on, hey, I know what it was like to be stuck and like totally lost where and just not even there's so much that goes into publishing, and there's a reason traditional publishing is so huge, and there's so many different like occupations within the machine, you know?
Yeah, you really are a small business owner as an indie
Oh my God.
author
You're like
having that.
10 small business owners. Like,
Yeah.
you are doing every little thing. It is really made a lot easier. Every time I do feel overwhelmed, I try to think like, who do I know who I think they're killing it at this? You know, who do I know that is like doing some really great social media, and then I can message them on Instagram and say, hey, like we know each other. Can you give me some pointers?
I'm curious, who are some of your big inspirations, like other indie authors that inspire you?
I really love Lexi Eldridge or Ellie Eldridge and Bex DeVoe. I keep throwing an R in there in my brain for some reason. They've been absolutely wonderful and they always answer all my questions. I think they're doing some really great work at going to a lot of in-person shows and book events, and they were telling me about their pocket-sized books, which they're just the cutest little thing.
What is a pocket-sized book? I've never heard of that before. Just literally a book, like a mini?
Yeah, and I'm seeing Leona Riley do a lot of them too, where it's just a book and it fits into your pocket. It's a whole novella and it's just tiny, and they're cute, and you can fit them in your purse or your pocket.
Sign me up immediately. More book merch that I did not know I needed. Perfect.
I know, it's the thing that I miss the most about mass market books being like discontinued is like, well, that fit perfectly in my purse.
I was curious so you have your kind of four main characters. You have Ellis, Lacey, Steele, and Maestro.
Yes.
What were sort of the inspiration behind these characters? Because I felt like, maybe some Batman influence. Obviously, there's like that, just almost that old school superhero feel to your writing. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I did start watching, so I had a little roster of movies that I was going to watch when I decided I was going to work on a sort of superhero romance. And some people have messaged me and said, is there Megamind vibes in this? And I'm like, yes, there is. Because I love the Megamind and Roxanne. If you've ever seen that movie, it's adorable. The reporter who's, and he's the bad guy in that movie. Well, I want to say superhero comic books are like considered one of the like few truly American art forms. Things that have originated here, things that they're not quite as big in other places as they are in the US. And the thing is, when you set up this dichotomy of like superhero, supervillain, there's always going to be this want to kind of twist it and say, well, what if the villain was the hero, or what if the hero was in the wrong? And I think, it's one of those things that people always say, like, oh, why does Batman go around beating people up when like he's a billionaire and he could be supporting like mental health institutions, he could be supporting healthcare institutions for people. And I think that's kind of where I was starting with Steele, the superhero in this book, is that he's very much just like a Batman kind of character. He thinks he's all that. He's Batman gone wrong. He's Batman in a cynical way. He thinks he's all that, but really it's his money that's putting the power there. That is money that allows him to play around with people's lives and, city property. And I really love, there was this show when I was growing up called X-Men Evolution, which was like a cartoon, kind of like the prelude to the X-Men comics. I kind of thought of it. It shows them growing up and like coming into their powers, and it's there's so much of the background day-to-day life, and I really love in superhero stories when I think we love the big cinematic fights in superhero comics and stuff, but I think the really juicy stuff is the quiet moments when they get to be a person, and they get to reflect on everything they're doing and their reasons for why they're doing this.
Tell me a little bit more about how Lacey and Ellis fit into that, because we have, they're definitely more human, where, Steele, I felt, was larger than life, but his vulnerability was kind of in that he was like a fraud, essentially. He the big superhero that he's made out to be. He reminds me a little bit of, what is that TV show with the superheroes where
Is it The Boys?
Yes. Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of that, where it's like he's just not the big hero he's all cracked up to be. And then you have Lacey, who's kind of fallen into his trap a little bit, and Ellis, who is not necessarily the bad guy that he seems to be. What was your inspiration for those characters?
So Lacey she kind of starts from this archetype of superhero's girlfriend, I think there's so many superhero's girlfriend, and she's a reporter, she's, Lois Lane kind of type. And I wanted her, she was kind of a mystery to me because I couldn't nail down her personality at first, but I wanted her to start from this place of, she's within his world, she operates entirely from like his worldview. And his worldview is, Well, so Steel is very much just me hating on Elon Musk. I'm gonna be so real because like I'm so tired of these billionaires who. Sorry, I'm gonna get on my soapbox.
Go stand on it.
Just billionaires who make these big promises about like I'm gonna end world hunger, I'm gonna take us to Mars, like whatever, and then they're all bravado and they don't actually do any of the good that they say that they're gonna do, and they think they're superheroes, and that's what I wanted to encapsulate within Steel Heel's character. Like I wanted him to be everything that I thought was wrong with like billionaires and their perception of themselves, and it's that perception that they market to everyone else. And so Lacey is totally taken in by the way he perceives himself or the way he wants to be perceived. And Ellis is kind of like the antidote to that. He's this guy who, he's not he's not the super villain, he's not the arch nemesis. He doesn't really have a dog in this fight, but he sees this guy for what he is, and he sees, kind of the cracks within the system, and he knows the truth of it, really. And I think it's because of his very human interactions with Lacey that she's able to come around and like start to understand his worldview and the way that it contradicts a lot of things that she's not able to see because of where she lives.
Yeah, no, I'm going off book here a little bit, I guess, but it just reminds me of, I think just in general, it's so important that people have wide social circles, I guess, of people who come from different walks of life and different belief systems and different geographical locations, like however you want to put it. It really opens your eyes, because I feel like Lacey, she was in such a bubble when she was kind of under Clayton's thumb, and in meeting Ellis, her horizons expanded and she was able to see the truth for what it was, which is so hard to do if you're keeping your little social bubbles super tiny. It's very easy to become deceived or deluded, I think.
This is the insulated echo chamber that we kind of build for ourselves when we only seek out people who agree with us and seek out people whose lifestyles are very similar to our own. And it is really that you got to get out of your bubble. You got to dip into it.
Yeah, it almost feels like fighting your human nature at some point. Obviously, it's
because it's
super
leaving your
important.
comfort zone, and it's leaving the things that you think the things that build your world.
Lacey, she has this sort of forced loyalty to Clayton, almost like she's been brainwashed, honestly. And it creates this rift between her and Ellis, because even though she likes Ellis, she doesn't want to be with Clayton anymore. She's established that in her own mind. She cannot force herself to put her foot down about it. And can you expand on some of her psychology a little bit there, of why it's so difficult for her to make that clean break and just be with the person that she wants to be with?
Yeah. So it was forever ago, but I had a relationship where I tried to break up with this guy like 6 or 7 times. Like I just kept trying, and every time I left that conversation, I was like, how did we get to this part where that didn't work? He would always like find a way to talk me out of it. And that was kind of the building blocks for like what's going on with Lacey and Clayton. She keeps saying, I want this to end. And he keeps saying, well, let's find a good moment in the news cycle for this to happen, for this to work for me. And she keeps trying to be the agreeable person. She keeps trying to, I think she thinks, not that she thinks she's a good person, she wants to be a good person. She wants to treat people well. And it's that Clayton exploits. He sees that within her, and there's a little bit of dialogue that kind of hints at the way because they don't have many on-page conversations, but we get this sense that he's kind of twisting a little bit of therapy speak to make her think that she's the problem, that she needs to look inward, that she's being abusive, when really it's him who's exerting all this control on her.
Yeah, I think it's frightening and very, kind of an honest look at real life that does happen. I think people who are very manipulative, they're able to, when you are just trying to do your best and set boundaries, they will make you feel guilty for that and make you feel like you have done something wrong by not catering to me and my needs.
I think that's like the thing, that's the trap of manipulation, is that you want to do the good thing, you want to do the right thing, but people will try to convince you by standing up for yourself that you're hurting them, and it creates that constant pattern of self-abandonment. Yeah, no, and sometimes you just gotta put your foot down and say, okay, I will be a bitch for like a minute.
Totally. And it's not even being a bitch, that's just like the feeling that is being put onto you, and trying to stand up for yourself. And I definitely think Lacey certainly deals with that. And Ellis kind of clocks it, and he gets frustrated with it. Um,
Yes, this
which
is like a really, sorry, I'm like
Go ahead.
something that I think is it's a frustrating thing when you see one of your friends going through that kind of a situation where it's like, I wish you would just leave this guy. You know, he's so rude to you, he's so, bad for you, and you're clearly like trying to leave, but you get frustrated because your friend is then making all these excuses like, oh, let me like you guys are just seeing this badly from the bad side of him, but he's really great. Here's all these redeeming qualities. There's a book that came out by popular feminists. It was called Adult Braces, and I'm
Oh, I've
seeing
heard of
this
that.
huge reaction to it where she keeps trying to, and I don't know for sure that this is like how her relationship actually is going, but it reminded me so thoroughly of like some bad relationships that I've had where, you feel like you're misrepresenting this person because you have seen their good parts, but you're not willing to see the ways that the bad parts are outweighing it by now.
Hmm.
And I think like when you're in that situation as the friend, like we hear in the book that Lacey's friends have stopped talking to her essentially. They've kind of left her in this bubble alone with Clayton because they're so frustrated with the way that she doesn't want to listen to them, the way that and then she's got this one friend who's kind of timid to voice her, hey, I don't think that you're happy in this relationship. I think you could step out of this and be better. And because she doesn't want to lose her friendship and she doesn't want to leave Lacey alone in this. And I think we see Ellis take on also that he doesn't want to. He's so gradual with bringing his worldview to the way Lacey perceives things because I think he doesn't want to just push her away by giving it to her all at once.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And you definitely get that in the writing that it's just this very lonely place that Lacey has
Mm.
found herself in. And she's trying to break out of it, but I think it's hard, to
Yeah, no,
see
it,
that.
it literally it's part of like the abuse and manipulation cycle, the way that victims are isolated.
Let's talk about Steele and Maestro a little bit.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, break down that relationship with me. It's just more ways in which Steele is being manipulative.
Mm.
And, Maestro surprised me by, I mean, he's basically just this little old man, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So talk to me about them and their dynamic a little bit.
I think he's truly just Steele's scapegoat. Kind of in my mind, they've like met maybe once or twice in their lives. Like they don't have like a much of an interpersonal relationship with each other. He's truly just like a guy who worked at Steele's company and created something that in his mind, like, because he's uh Ellis and his brother are the experiments that he's created, and he definitely sees himself as a father to these two. And he's very much like your mad scientist, very typical mad scientist character, who creates for the sake of creation almost because he's in love with what he's pursuing. And I think it's just so diabolical that it is the way our I don't even know what system to call it. Intellectual property system works in, especially corporate America, is like things that you create on company time belong to the company you work for, not to you. I've seen my mom, she used to work for AT&T. She had a couple of patents and they belong to AT&T and not to her, even though she's the one who put all the work in. Like, so I'm salty about things like that. And that's kind of what has created what the bulk of Steele and Maestro's relationship is. Steele sees this employee as like someone he can get more things out of, and everything he's done belongs to him, but even though he's done none of the work himself. And I think when I was writing the book, I kept kind of writing these really long conversations about the legal battle between Steele and Maestro, and I kept going back like, I don't like that this is in here and that it bogs down the action, and like I don't like it's here, it's backstory, it's for it to make sense. I don't think anyone's actually reading the book because they want to know about this stuff. It's drawing like a little too much detail on the backdrop. No one's ever going to zoom in that much. So I did take out those paragraphs, but there's a lot that ended up being cut on that.
Interesting. So, while we're on the topic, can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? Are you a plotter or do you just kind of start writing and see where it goes? What does that look like for you?
A little bit of both. What I tend to do is I take a lot of notes throughout my day. If I watch a movie and there's a funny line in it, I say, maybe I can take that. Maybe I can pocket that line. I'll rewrite it a little bit. I'll recontextualize it, but I'm always on the lookout for things that make me think that's really cool or that's really funny. And I have all these notes, and then I use religiously Gwen Hayes's Romancing the Booklet as or outline structure for my for every book basically. And I create a bunch of chapter headings that all kind of correspond to the emotional beats that she talks about in her book, like, the meet cute, the no way, which is like the rejection of the call, uh, and then the maybe this could work, all those beats, the breakup, the dark night. And I try to sort all these little tiny ideas that I've collected, and I kind of try to put things that sound like they go together, and I kind of just sprinkle them throughout the outline, and then I start writing and trying to like sew all these ideas together. I know that's like the most ADHD way to
No,
like
that's
tackle a
it's cool.
task.
You're just kind of it reminds me of I don't know if you're a fan of The Office.
Yes, I've seen.
Okay. Well, the Office Ladies podcast is with Jenna Fisher and
Ooh.
Angela Kinsey. They have a podcast where they talk about the creation of The Office.
Mm.
And when they talk about the writers, it's interesting to hear how a lot of the kooky, fun scenes that you see in the TV show are kind of based on real life things that happened in the writers' lives. And it reminded me of what you just said, how you'll be walking around and you'll be like, I'm archiving that. Okay, let me hold on to that. Like maybe that's something that I can use in my books. And then you just put it all. So you're definitely a plotter then. You need like a good
Yes.
plot structure to dive into.
Yeah, I like having like it doesn't feel like I ever have a good idea of what the plot itself is going to look like, but I know what the emotional beats I need to hit are, and so that provides me the most structure. And I think as long as I'm playing to that, the rest of the story can't stray too far.
Was there a character you've written that sort of surprised you? It could be from this book or any of your other books where you had a plan for the character and they just sort of took on a life of their own as you were writing them.
I do want to say it was Lacey for me, especially in this book, because I didn't really have much of a plan of where I wanted her to go. A lot of her early scenes, she was just kind of reacting to the things that were going on around her, and she wasn't giving me a lot to go on. And as I kind of got like halfway through the book, I had a moment. I was like, oh, I don't like her. I don't think I would be friends with her. I was like, because she's so insulated in, this Steele's world. I kind of thought she seems like the kind of person that I would get into like a really difficult political argument with and like really struggle with, being like, well, why do you see the world this way? And I think that's kind of why Ellis's plot became this part of the story kind of came in later on, if that makes sense. The way there a lot of the weight of their emotional conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, especially because you were talking about how Lacey's an interesting character because she has to be someone who would date Steele, but
Yes,
also someone who can grow into the heroine that we need her to be in the story. So
exactly.
I could definitely see how starting out it would be like, oh my gosh, I just want to throttle this person. You talked about having to cut some of the scenes between Maestro and Steele. Were there any other scenes you had to cut that you just really wished could have made it into the final book, but they just had to go?
Well, so there was a plot element. There were two things that were kind of part of Lacey's arc that I ended up ultimately cutting, and I'm still a little bit on the fence about like whether or not I should have kept them in. I think it would have made the book quite a bit longer because I wasn't loving the way that they were. It didn't feel like they were grounded enough in the plot and that I would need to add more scenes to like really keep them. One of the things was I wanted Lacey to be bisexual and I wanted it to be something that Steele was constantly kind of being like, well, don't tell people that, well, don't say that in
Mm,
interviews, like don't, because he represents this like very narrow slice of like, he represents the establishment in so many ways,
mm.
and anything that doesn't conform to the establishment has to go. I felt like that was very compelling, but at the same time, I felt like I needed to write in more characters to kind of illustrate her history and kind of make it seem like it's not just a lip service thing that never, like, I wanted it to feel like it had enough room in the plot and didn't feel like it was taking up enough space. I was just at a point where I was like, you know what, I will save this for another book. I will bring this for another character who I think it feels more personal and more relevant to them. The second thing was I was going to give Lacey superpowers by the end of the book. The ooze was going to
Oh, that
kind
could have
of
been fun.
it would have been really cool, but at the same time, I felt like I was setting up this dichotomy of like people who choose to view themselves as superheroes, who choose to enact not just vigilante justice, but like, people who think that like I get to put my foot down and I get to make the
Mhm.
decisions on who lives, who dies, who, gets to do what they want to do. And I think I didn't want to make her the same as Steele. I wanted her to kind of be more of a foil to him. I wanted her to stand against all of the things that he stood for. And I didn't think that giving her powers, while it would have been really cool, it would have, I think, maybe negated some of the message of the book.
I think that's definitely a testament to how deep the book actually is. I think I think it would be quite easy for someone to like be like, well, it's monster romance, like it doesn't go that deep. Like it can go pretty deep as it happens. And I think specifically like, yeah, while giving her superpowers would have been cool, I could see how it would sort of negate the point that you were trying to make in the book, which is that nobody has the right to kind of step in and make these types of decisions for society or other people. So that's really cool, and I think your call makes sense. Though I will say I will definitely read a book if you have a bisexual heroine in a future book. Let me know. I would love to
I
read that
shall.
one.
I shall. I think it's something that I want to like make more central to the storyline and really give it the time it deserves.
Hmm.
But if you want to talk about monster romance and just not even monster romance, just straight up like still like the weirdest erotica you can find. Katie from Cheap Smut and I have had a couple of conversations about this, about how sometimes they just contain the most like deep thoughts, and you're like, what is this doing here? We were talking. She said she. We were talking about my series, Claws and Cubicles and Love Laugh Lich, but then like I think Sam Nacosta's Morning Glory Milking Farm. Ever you read the title and you go, oh my god, and then you read the book and you're like, oh, we've got some real economical like big brain stuff going on here, and I need to buckle in for it. Like workers' rights and all that.
That's so interesting. So I am actually someone who I have a video of just a TikTok video of strange book covers, and I use Morning Glory
Yeah.
Milking Farm for that video because I have not read it. So I'm not going to knock a book. I have not read it, but definitely. All right, if Iroh ends up in the shot, everyone, this is Iroh here. He's being extremely clingy right now. But going back to the book, yeah, so that's interesting. So that book has political themes running through it.
Yeah. I think every book is political, and it's like whether or not the author. I'm there. I'm thinking about the thing that Andy Weir said recently about how he didn't like to include politics in his books. And yet there's like a moment in Project Hail Mary where they're talking about global warming, and they're like, there's a kid who in the class who says, yeah, my dad doesn't believe in that. That's intensely political. People who are global warming deniers are a very politically charged conversation right there. And whether or not you mindfully or willfully engage with it in your book when you're writing it or when you're reading it, I think it doesn't matter. It's there, and you might as well make use of it while it like, you've got your soapbox. You might as well talk about the things that are important to you.
How has your writing changed since your debut? Because you've written quite a few books, haven't you?
Somehow, if they just keep happening. I would say I focus a lot more on making. This is like a kind of boring technical answer, I think. Making things emotionally consistent and not just. I feel like when I wrote Love, Laugh, Lich and The Orc from the Office, it was a series of like vignettes that didn't really go together as chapters. And so if I would go back, like change things to how I write now, I would try to like create a lot more emotional depth and more emotional consistency. I think I kind of a little more blasé about it. Didn't really focus on it as much when I first started writing.
Interesting. So, what advice would you have for people who are just starting out writing, or maybe new indie authors who are just thinking of self publishing? Kind of two parts to the same question.
I'm gonna default to Roxy Noir's advice that she gave me when I first started, which is the best marketing you can do for the book you currently have out now is write the next book. It's always just write the next book, and because there's, I think, as an indie author, because you're doing everything, but as an author and as an artist, there's always a lot of ego, and there's a lot of, it can be really hard to feel that your work is reaching people or to get your work out to people. And when you feel like you're not, it's so hard not to self-compare to other people, especially, everyone who's been doing this for 10 years more than you, and everyone who's, gotten a viral breakout and, it looks like they're doing amazing. It's so hard to not look at them and say, why am I not there yet? Why am I not that? And instead of, I know it's very hard to like pull yourself and change tracks from that kind of thinking, but that is, it's borrowing misery, and it's energy you can put into something that makes you happier and something that may get you, will just continue to get you further along on your journey.
I love that concept of borrowing misery from the future. It's like worrying about something beforehand. I think
Yeah.
I get told that whenever I'm being overly anxious, I have people in my life telling me like you're giving that energy to something that hasn't even happened yet. Yeah, I think that's very applicable to indie writers, especially who are trying to make it and you feel discouraged and you have the weight of like all of you have to do the writing, the editing, the artwork, the advertising, I'm sure there are things I'm even missing because I haven't published a book yet. Like it's just wild out there. I can imagine it gets anxiety provoking pretty fast.
Yeah. I was just on the phone with my friend Marty V. She's a contemporary romance author. We share a podcast called Romance Writers Therapy. Sorry to.
Oh yeah, plug it. Awesome. I'm actually going to be interviewing her
Yeah, she
in
told
a
me
few
about
weeks.
that. I'm
Yeah.
super excited
Yeah.
to see how that goes because she's one of my favorite people in the whole world. And we were talking whenever we have our phone calls. Like she tells me about what she's working on and like what she's struggling with, and I poke at it a little bit, and then I tell her what I'm working on, and she pokes at it a little bit. And so I was saying like this chapter, I feel like it's kind of pointless, and all this stuff happens, and I don't think it amounts to anything, and I have all these criticisms of it. And then somehow the conversation wound around and I told her about this book I was reading, that I love other books in this series, but this one book I'm like really struggling with, and I'm like, I have all these criticisms for it. And then she goes, you want your book to be perfect, and you work so hard on, considering every possible angle that you can, and like you can't get all of it because everyone has their own limited scopes, and in the entirety of like your writing career, if you publish 20 books, like some of them are going to be better than others, and some of them are just gonna miss the mark a little bit, and there's always going to be regrets of things like, I wish I did better, but like you wrote it with the level of skill that you have at that point. And I think it's okay to kind of say to yourself, maybe this one I'm okay to like send it out with a couple of flaws, send it out not entirely perfect, and kind of reconcile with nothing's ever gonna, like, I'm never gonna create a perfect book. And some books, and the thing is, like, I'm rambling so much about like how much I disliked this one book that I was reading, but I love all the rest of the books in the series. Like there's that, and then someone else might love this book that I'm struggling with so much, that there's such a variety out there. And I think
you definitely can't please everybody with the books you put out there. And I always say aim for excellence over perfectionism.
yes,
Which I think perfectionism just kills progress. It really does, because it's paralyzing. Keeps you from like putting your work out there. You could sit there for the rest of your life trying to put out a perfect book, and it would never get thrown into the ether.
Yeah, no, you just gotta say, you know what, I'm gonna accept that it has some flaws, and that you just gotta know when like you've put a lot of effort into it and it is really good, and you've done excellent, but you don't, it's gotta be done. It can't be perfect, but it's gotta be done.
You got to know when to call it too, I think.
Yeah. And I think like there's something about the next book that you start you're going in with all the skills that you've learned from this past book, and now you get the chance to write the book, to set it up in the ways that maybe you regret that you didn't do in the previous book you've written.
And that's just progress, right? Like learning.
Yeah.
It's just becoming a better writer, I think.
Absolutely. Every book teaches you new stuff.
So, pivoting a little bit here, as an indie author, what does your relationship with social media look like?
I used to be on social media a whole bunch more under a different pen name, and a different genre entirely. I used to have like a semi-popular Tumblr blog years and years ago, and that was like that did so much of the heavy lifting for marketing those books. And since like that's petered out, Tumblr is it's not entirely died, but a lot of people have moved out. And the neighborhood isn't the same. And it's hard to like find community like that again. And I go into social media thinking of like, oh, I don't even know. It's not quite the same it used to be, if that makes sense. There used to be a lot of, I don't know, it just felt like a busier town square. Even like Twitter or Threads now, the vibe has very much changed, and I think the algorithms that they're creating are disconnecting us from like things that made social media feel like things were catching fire. The things that when something went viral and like everyone heard about it. I think we're going to see a decrease in social media over the next few years. I think we're already in a decrease, and we're seeing a lot of like bot accounts. We're seeing a lot of
Yeah.
content that's not original. We're seeing a lot of like AI created things just everywhere. And I can't tell you how many times like someone sent me like an AI generated cat video, and it's like I don't want to see this if a real cat didn't do it. Like it's funny because a real cat did it.
I think social media is just starting to feel less human. And
Yes.
maybe that's because it is getting to be less human, which is sad. But it's also kind of this, I mean, these are my words, not yours, but it feels like this necessary evil where you need to have some type of social media presence, like depending on your platform as an indie author. But it's also, yeah, it just feels so saturated with slop and negativity that
It does. And there's like it's been pushed to us for at least the last 10, 15 years as like you have to have a social media marketing like in order to market your book. And I would say that's still true. I do think we're going to see, I don't know how we're going to see it change. I think there's going to be a change because I think people are craving authenticity. I think they're creating that one to one connection. I think that's what social media was kind of emulating for us before, that one to one. Like, if I really wanted to, I could just at an author and be like, hey, what's up with this book? A little aggressive there, but you could do that and you might get an answer, which is so very different from any kind of access people have had to authors or readers before. And now I think it's changed and we're going to see something new emerge. I hope we do.
so too. No, I definitely hope you're right. And I think you are. I think people are craving just something different. But moving on to something maybe a little more positive,
Mm.
what inspires you as a writer? Who are some of the writers that you just love to read, that you feel inspired
Mm.
by? Even if it's not books, just what inspires you as a writer?
I love Roxane Moire's books. She is just the funniest person ever. Every book that she writes has me laughing out loud and being annoying to my friends, being like, did you read this yet? I'm so inspired by like the writers in my sort of peer review group that we do, where we read each other's chapters. Rebecca Conrad is such an inspiration to me. She's yet to be published, but we're gonna we're gonna get her there. One of the kindest and most supportive people I know. Marty V, who also is just always there to help me untangle my thoughts. I'm really loving everything James Gunn is doing with the DC universe. I really loved his Superman, and I loved his Peacemaker, and even though I don't like gory things, he does such a good job with like his message, his understanding of like the current modern social climate and how he weaves his stories into that. I think I'm watching a lot of Bridgerton, and I love anything that's just like pastel rococo kind of like architecture. I just want to live inside the frosting of a cake kind of look.
Lovely. Oh, that sounds, living in the frosting of a cake sounds like now you've unlocked a new life goal for myself. Kate Pryor, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. So you take care.
You too. Thank you.